What's up? Hello, guys, and welcome to your very first multimedia lecture. And uh, yeah, it's gonna be crazy, it's gonna be cool, and hopefully, you guys will enjoy it. Um, so, I'm just gonna kick off straight away and um, launch the brief. But first of all, we're gonna have a look at a presentation. And as you can see, we will be doing for our very first brief UX and UI design. So yeah, let's do this. Okay, cool. So for the very first one is, or our first slide is the UI design process. And this is quite a, can become quite a hectic exercise, especially for first time for your first time. So I'm going to guide you through this, and I'm going to help you understand better what the difference is between UX and UI design. And we'll be looking at different models, how to do layouts, and all of those things. Okay, cool. So first of all, we'll look at models. So the first model we'll look at is the waterfall design model, which is as follows. So you'll start first with the requirements. So what does my app, uh, what are the requirements that I need to do or achieve during the design process? Okay, so we'll start off with requirements, and then you'll do the designs, and from there on, the designs will follow through into the code. Then integration. So integration would be uh, maybe launching a beta version of the app, or the game, or the website, or whichever um, users have to interact with. And from there on, um, you'll get feedback, and you'll go back and do some fixes, etc. Then we have acceptance. So it is what it is, and um, it's working, and everything is happy, and then you release. And then you'll go back, and then from the release, you'll go back to requirements and better the app, new versions, newer updates. Um, yes. Okay. Cool. Next, and this is the most used one, is the interactive model. So you'll start off with the design, and the design has research, wireframing, design drafting, and final designs. These are all aspects during the design process. So you'll do your research, then you'll do low fidelity wireframes. So the reason for the wireframes is so that you can determine the user experience. In other words, how would I move from one screen to another screen? How would the layout of each screen look in a low fidelity, which is pencil to paper? Medium fidelity, then you can start digitizing stuff, creating icons or basic icons, text boxes, uh, basic layouts, then design drafting, which is part of the medium fidelity. And then final designs is your high fidelity final designs that you'll present to the client, or that will be implemented into your app. Then we'll move on to implementation, or implement. And that's when you'll obviously send your designs to your coders, or to your developer team, and they'll start writing the code, implementing it. Yeah, cool. Okay. And then the evaluate process. So this is then when you get it back and you go through it and you'll see, okay, it's quite difficult to navigate from here to there, so how can we fix this? And then you'll go back to the design process again, and then you'll go to the wireframes and you'll see, okay, let's move this here, or maybe we can achieve this goal in less steps. And what I mean by that is, so how the lesser clicks, the better. For instance, I mean, nowadays it's so easy to take these things for granted, but have you ever counted how many times do you have to tap on Instagram to post a photo? And this has been in development for each generation of Instagram updates. So from the very first Instagram to where we are now version, um, the amount of taps or the amount of interactions that users have to do before they can post or to get to the posting stage or posting something has become so much easier and less effort. So yeah, that's basically how it would work. Um, I know it sounds slightly like rocket science, but your guys will get into it, and it will become easier as we go through it. Okay, cool. And this process goes round and round and round and round until everything is working 100% and the designs are working, UI and UX are interlinked with one another, users find the experience easy to navigate, etc. etc. Okay, cool. So the next step is unpacking the UI design process. So just in case I haven't mentioned this, UI is obviously for user interface, and the user interface is what we're gonna have a look at now. Okay, cool. So first of all, we'll do research, and this is quite an important part of the process, because if you haven't done sufficient research, your app will not work from the get-go. So this will include the target market that you are launching the app for. How does that target market make use of mobile devices or devices, whether it's websites or apps, software, the age difference of, let's say, if I have to create something for doctors or teachers, I have to go and check what my target market age group is, number one, so that when I do design my stuff, that it's easy to navigate for someone that has just begun and is tech savvy, or someone that has been in the industry for years and is not tech savvy. Okay, so all of these things go into consideration when research is being done. So for the next example, I'm going to show you guys a video, and then we can talk about it. Yeah. Cool.
Wave about some whole state of a serious situation. We have a situation we're trying to contain. We are in lockdown.
Ridley Scott's original Alien movie presented a really grounded view of the future. This wasn't holograms and touchscreens. It's chunky, analog, push-button technology. This is a world of CRT, not LCD.
Early in development, our artist studied the work of Ron Cobb, who was one of the original concept artists on the film, and the goal was that if we could understand his process, we would be able to expand on the universe while still remaining faithful to the original source.
This lo-fi sci-fi approach doesn't just inform the visuals, it also has a big effect on how we design the gameplay. If you take the motion tracker, for example, it's big and it's heavy, and you can't hold it at the same time as a weapon. And all it does is tell you the movement of an object on a 2D plane, and even then, only on a small cone in front of you.
In order to stay faithful to the source, we set ourselves a rule: we wouldn't build anything that couldn't have been built on the original set in 1979.
I'm in.
Everything in our game conforms to this retro future aesthetic.
The first objective was to strip back the UI as much as possible. For the on-screen elements that we do have, we had to look at a lot of different options to try and recreate the softness and fuzziness that the technology of the 70s presented. The technique that we found most effective was actually to take gameplay footage and UI elements and record them onto VHS tape and play them back through an old portable television. And on its way, we would distort the cables and stamp on the tape and generally destroy equipment in the process. And once we got that back into the game, we found that it didn't just look authentic, it was authentic.
This is a game set in the future, but baked in the past. It's a place which we can really relate to. It's also a world in which technology won't save you.
Okay, cool. So, as you guys saw in the video, they explained how they did their research in order to create the user interface for the game, which is super cool because they actually went back and obviously they looked at all the Alien films and then based their designs and design process on the research that they've done. And as the one guy stated, is that it's a game that is set in the future, but plays off in the past or was launched in the past. And I mean, from a UI design point of view, it just brings everything so much better together, as if they were just going to design new elements, put it in the game, and it wouldn't have any connection to the actual films and the genre of that time. Cool. Okay. So the next step we'll be looking at is wireframing. So wireframing is literally pen and paper, drawing stuff out, creating icons, creating screen layouts, and really starting at the basics. And it's quite important because this way you can navigate almost manually through your app and you'll be able to see where things are working and where they are not working, whether elements fit properly on the page, are your icons all in the same style. It all starts with basic wireframing, and it is probably one of the important parts, the most important parts of UI design. So you guys will have to do the pen and paper. GIF. Here we have an example of a digital wireframing. So once you've done basic drawings, you can go into Illustrator or Photoshop and you can create these little wireframe mockups. And from there on, you can almost create like links between buttons and navigational elements. So as you can see on the image, there are these red, blue, green, and orange lines that connect certain screens with certain elements. So if I tap on the back button from screen A, it will, or screen B, it will take me back to screen A. And you almost indicate that to on paper or in your designs. The reason why we do this and not just design it is because you will most likely, if you continue in UI and UX design and in multimedia and you go into the industry and you apply for a UI UX designer job, and you will most likely work with a design team, and then on the far side of the globe in another country, your developers will receive the designs from you and they'll do the coding. So this almost is like a roadmap for your developers in order to know how to structure the code and navigation of the app so that they can make sure that what you gave them and what needs to happen connects with one another. And I have been in the situation where I've worked with developers that don't really speak, or English is not their mother tongue. So then these wireframes become super important. It just makes the explaining the app and the navigational process from one screen to another so much easier, as if you just sent all the design elements and some screens and said, okay, you guys can code this out, and they have to go and figure out which screen fits with what. So yes, this is quite very important. It is also a very cool, almost like a documentation, so that if you do along the way come across some problems or something isn't working as it should, you can always go back to your wireframes and have a look where you can make fixes regarding navigation, screen layouts, and those things. Yes. Okay, cool. Then obviously icons and icon designs, logo designs, is also quite important. These also get wireframed from basic sketches to digital final high fidelity designs. So yes, lekker. And this is just to show you the different sizes of icons. So you'll have your main icon on your mobile device, which you tap, but then you'll also have in your settings menu, you'll have the icon next to the application's name, which is a different size. So it's quite important to make sure that you have the correct sizes for mobile devices, etc, etc, depending on menus and where in the app I am, or where on my phone I am accessing the app. Furthermore, then we also look at buttons and navigational elements, how these would look and be displayed. So these are also being drawn out. If it's a drop-down menu, if it's a tick box, if it's a radio button. Yes. And if I hover on something, does it give me a hover state? Does it give me an active state? Yes, okay. So these are also quite important. This is just an example of how you would start off. So this is a HUD display. And as we can see, we've got our basic elements in there. And then as we go along, we start adding and refining the UI design and layout. So as you can see from here, it's very basic outlines, and then we move on to adding some detail, making things opaque, giving them glow effects, adding more information on the dash, etc, etc. And then here we have the final render of how the process, or how the final HUD would look. Take note of how from here, this still looks pretty awesome. But obviously along the way, someone went and said, okay, you know what, the color scheme and the way this displays doesn't really fit with the rest of either the game or the mobile app or the look and feel that we are actually trying to achieve. So then the designers had to go back and rework some stuff. And yes, you guys will hate me at some points, but yeah, you're gonna rework a lot of things. I'm gonna send you back some feedbacks like nee, jy moet weer gaan doen. So yeah, get ready for that. Cool. Okay, design drafting. So here we have a draft of basic elements, whether it's a calendar, input fields, different input fields. So you'll see in the middle top, we have your basic text box. Then we have the slightly bigger text box with the draggable element at the bottom. So that is how it would look if the text box or input box is expanded. Then we have a drop-down menu underneath that, and how it would look once I have activated or clicked on the drop-down. Furthermore, how buttons would look on their on and off states, active and non-active states. Yes. Okay. These are all kind of things that we take for granted. We work every day, for instance, in Adobe, Illustrator, or Photoshop. And if you think about it, someone had to go and actually design all those states and make sure that when I click on the crop tool and I hold it down, it gives me different options. How do those icons display? How do they display once I click on them? And then how does the mouse pointer actually change from just a plain mouse pointer to the crop symbol? Okay. And those are all design elements that went through the build system and design system of Adobe's designers. And we take those things for granted. I mean, if you really think about it, someone had to go and design all those things. And I'm sure if you Google and you'll look at, let's say, Photoshop CS3, and which is a very earlier model, and we look at the latest CC, you would definitely see how these icons and drop-down menus have evolved, and how with every major release or major version release, these design elements change. Okay. So here's just another example of when I click on menu item 2 and it drops down, and then if I move my mouse, it indicates a hover state. So a hover state is when you hover on something, then it shows, it either turns gray or it kind of indicates where you are in a navigational process. So that's a hover state. So here we can see that, okay, I have my active state is menu item 2, the drop down. However, my hover state, so where I'm aiming to go, if I can put it that way, is menu item 4. And you have to kind of show your users that. In mobile design, obviously we do not have a hover state because we don't hover with, or at this point in time, we can't hover on screens. So there you would just have a active selected state and a non-active state when it comes to mobile designs or mobile interactions. Here's another example of the iPhone UI and the different design elements, buttons, status bars, toolbars, switch on, switch off, app icon, URL fields and text fields, etc. Oh, so all these things get built out and designed before the app actually gets launched. Cool. This is just an example of basic drawings on how the how it would look in a low fidelity design. So video sizes, now playing, you guys get what I'm going at with the whole wireframing and drafting process, is that it is much easier, it seems like a lot of work, but it's much easier to fix and navigate once you've done the initial wireframing and design drafting. Then it's easier to fix things when we are in a final design stage than if we just jump directly to making final designs on screen, and then halfway through we encounter, oh snap, but this doesn't work now, and then you have to go back and fix everything again. So it's easier if you have a roadmap from the start, a wireframe roadmap, and you work from that towards the final designs. Okay, cool. This is just another example of HUD, heads-up display, and the different design elements and how the car or the window actually shows you the engine and the make and model of the car, and these are all UI elements that had to be designed and played a role in creating this. Just some more examples of what everything or what UI entails. So we've seen that in games we have UI design. We obviously have UI design on airplanes, anything that is screen related, where you have to navigate from one thing to another, has the UI build out, or a UI designer worked on it and made sure that it's visually easy to navigate and understand what's happening, and that you get the proper information when you look at a certain screen. Got it. And there's the final one. So next up, we're going to look at final design and design proposals. So this is the basic layout of how you would present your designs to a client or to the head of a design team once before you guys go to the client. And this is basically how you would lay out each element on screen. So over here, we can see that we've got some sliders. Let me just go back. We've got sliders, we've got variable controllers. So a slider is something that moves up and down or left and right. A variable controller is a knob, something that you can set variable controls to. And we also see how at the bottom, if I selected a date, it will have a red dot. And if it's inactive, it's just the plain gray. And also how typography and design will display on these elements. So this is also quite important, is if you have a look at the categories menu and the icon and the type is more or less the same size. If the type would have been, or the icon would have been smaller than the type, the balance in the design would have been off. And these are all things that you have to take into consideration. There's also things like hierarchy that is quite important. So typographic hierarchy. So if we look at the categories menu, then you'll see that categories is in bold and everything underneath is in a regular font weight. However, I can see that there's 3 new photos. So there is a notification of 3 new photos, and photos is also in a bold weight, font weight. So typographic hierarchy also plays a role in how you display certain elements and certain options. Here's another example where we can see active states and variable controllers and sliders, buttons, switches. Okay. And here's another example of basic navigation. So this is quite easy. Try and make your navigation as easy as possible and as understandable as possible. So if I want to create a task, it would have been weird if there was just a, let's say, the gear icon would have been at the tasks icon, if we swap those 2 icons around. So make sure that your icons are consistent, or not consistent, but is relatable to the action that you want your users to make. Okay, cool. Here's some more examples. Here we're looking at when you start laying it out for client presentation. So obviously you'll have to look at look and feel, color, your font type, all of that gets built into the presentation and sent to the client and for approval. And then once the client is happy, it gets sent to the developers so that they can code and make use of the correct colors, the correct fonts, the correct font sizes. It's, yeah, because green, a light green on my screen and a light green on your screen might be completely different. So that's why we include the hex color code so that our developers know exactly that this is the standard for light green. this is the standard for text that appear at the top of each menu. This is the standard for subtext or subheadings, and this is the font weight that subheadings and body copy make use of, so, or has to be in. So this is all built out and designed for your clients and also for your developers. This is just the basic build out of the screens for high fidelity wireframes, so that you can almost show how the final product will look. So as we can see, our player has different states or different screen states. So on the first screen, I can see that a song is playing, and how I can see that is that, or it's currently playing, and how I can see that is that the green progress bar is completely green and the play button is active. Then on the next screen, the progress bar, the little dot, is white and the play button is inactive. Okay, because it's only the outlines. And then on the next screen, I can see that it is being paused. Okay, because obviously the pause button is there and stuff like that. Cool. Then profiles. So the first screen shows that DJ shakes, and then obviously I've clicked on the playlist button, and then it gives me the album cover with the album name, and then a whole playlist of each song that is on that album. Take note of how they've displayed it and how they built it out. The back button is always at the top left hand side, or if we're looking at the other way, right hand side, but let's say left if you look at the screen. And it's consistent on every screen. So you can't move your back button from one point to another point during the process of design. It has to stay consistent throughout. Then also look at how they laid out. So the album name, and obviously they've got a little artwork, album artwork, and underneath that they have basic options. So the most used options that a user might click on. In other words, if I like this album, the first thing I'll do is I'll star it for whichever, to listen to it later on, to save it, or to add it to my favorites. The next option would be to either repeat it. Then the next option is to download it. And the next option is play the album. Okay. And these are all like part of semiotics, those icons, because even though I can't see, there's no indication that underneath the star it says add to favorites. I already know that if I star something, I'm adding it to favorites. It's the same as, you know, that when you heart something on Instagram, you are liking it. Okay. And then the next icon with the download, there's nothing that says download, but because we've been so much introduced to those icons, and it just becomes like part of the design process. So now the user knows already that, okay, that is for that, that is for that. So it's very simple. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Then obviously we have profile screens. So once you have created profiles, how the profiles will display, how does it look when I look at someone else's profile? So you have to think about that as well. It becomes quite a rabbit hole. What is not indicated on these screens is what happens when I start swiping on someone's profile. If I swipe up, do I see more options? Do I see his playlist? Do I see my playlists? All these kind of interactions. Yeah. The next step is, or the next thing is, look at how they designed their buttons. So all their main primary buttons are these nice big fat buttons that I can easily tap. The next thing that we can also look at is that when something is selected, it obviously has the green glow to it, and that green is consistent throughout the whole of the app. So laying out your designs like this gives your client or your developers quite a clear understanding of how would it look if I navigate throughout this. How does it display when I go to settings? How does it look when I change my password? All these micro interactions and design elements gets designed by UI designers. Then naturally, if you have social media, so how that would display, if you have videos, if you have, yeah, you guys get where I'm going at. How does it look when I start typing something, when the keyboard is active, when the keyboard is inactive? Cool. And then finally, the filters, how it would be activated. The switches. Switches are those green oval shaped stuff with the white in. So it's an on switch and an off switch. Ne? Okay. Cool. Buttons, inactive buttons. We have sliders. Yeah. Keith. This is just another example of a different style. Once again, we have buttons, we have active states, we have inactive states, we've got variable knobs and variable sliders, switches, Cool. That is that. So that covers UI element basics. And as you guys can see, when we talk about UI design, it's not always just like, oh, he only does design for apps. Shame. UI design is quite a broad field. if you are one day lucky enough to design some user interface for a car brand or even aircrafts. It's quite insane how broad you can go when you are a UI designer. So yes, that is that for part one. I'll see you guys in part two. And yes, cool. Thanks. Cheers.